Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a little clip with former Home Secretary James Cleverly on BBC Radio, where he made clear that it was not the ECHR that was blocking Rwanda flights, but the UK Supreme Court. Now, James Cleverly, along with Kemi Badenoch, is one of the Tory leadership contenders who is not standing on a platform of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. A potential attempt by two Brexiteers, weirdly, to avoid having the party tie itself to what is effectively Brexit Part 2, revenge of the Tory killing Brexit. Because I would argue that Brexit has infected the Conservatives so badly now. It's blocking off a lot of attempts to rebuild themselves. I mean, Brexit is acting like a huge break to us nationally, but the Tories have suffered from it as well. And this notion of leaving the ECHR, it really is just the second step, just as with Brexit. It's pushed by very wealthy people who want to take away our rights and freedoms. Because ultimately, what did they do with Brexit? Now that we can look back, they had Brexit, they left the EU, they had 4 more years in power. What did they do with it? They just took away our rights and freedoms. But not all Conservatives approve of the idea of leaving the ECHR, which is, from its supporters' point of view, the logical next step. And James Cleverly, in his interview, he was being asked how he would have responded if, let's say, Rishi Sunak had announced that, oh, we're going to leave the ECHR. He asked him, well, you just leave the cabinet, wouldn't you? And Cleverly refused to answer what he described as a hypothetical question, which is a little odd. Because when you're a leadership candidate for a political party, almost all questions you're going to be asked are hypothetical because, well, they centre around what you intend to do in the future as leader. They're all hypothetical then, aren't they? But anyway, he wasn't having it. But he did point out that it wasn't the ECHR blocking the flights, referring to the Rwanda scheme, but the UK Supreme Court, and we don't get to leave that. Now, in point of fact, I wouldn't put it past the Tories to leave the UK Supreme Court. In fact, in their 2019 manifesto, it did talk about doing just that. But the general point is one that many of us tried to make at the time. It wasn't something Cleverly himself shouted about as Home Secretary, I notice. Certainly, I don't remember that. And that is that the Rwanda flights were blocked not by a foreign court, as Sunak keeps falsely claiming the European Court of Human Rights is, but by a British court, which actually sits just across the road from our national parliament. And that Supreme Court made clear at the time in their judgment, their decision was based on a number of laws, including domestic law. They said even if we weren't part of the European Convention on Human Rights, because they were well aware of the political discussion going on, they said even if we weren't a member of it, the ruling would still be the same. Now, what's interesting is that Cleverly also tried to suggest he was dealing with the issue and solving the problem. I'm a winner, he said. I'm not in the habit of losing fights. It's like, great. Only he's never actually achieved anything in cabinet, has he? And also, there's no evidence that he was even winning on this. I mean, of all the many reasons why Sunak may have gone for the election in July instead of waiting till autumn, and there were lots of them, the Rwanda scheme was surely very high on the list. Because the Tories claim that flights were about to set off and that as soon as they did, all of the channel crossings would just disappear. Within weeks, Sunak said, within weeks. I mean, pretty much as soon as he said that, you knew he was going to call the election, I suppose, beforehand. Nigel Farage certainly suspected it. Nigel Farage proudly stated not a single flight will set off. So he believed that as well. Because other than booking some planes, which Labour are now using to deport people in compliance with the law, hence why the Supreme Court have raised no objections at all. What evidence is there that the Tories were actually going to send anyone this summer? I mean, first of all, they paid people to be voluntarily deported to Rwanda. Why do that if you think you've got a credible plan to do it with people who will be sent without being paid against their will? Second, the default position is that sending asylum seekers to Rwanda in line with the government's plan is unlawful. Because although Sunak passed legislation that he claims was going to remove this legal block, it was never tested in court, was it? Remember, a lot of Tory MPs, even as they voted for it, said they didn't think it would work. There were legal experts who said they weren't convinced it would work. So given that the Supreme Court didn't rule that actually, oh yeah, things have changed. You've tied our hands. Well done. You win, Mr. Sunak. So there's no reason to suppose that Sunak's legislation did work as he said it would. He denied us the test by calling the election just before we'd have seen one way or the other. It was all just a ruse to claim that any asylum seekers crossing the Channel to Britain from this point, and remember, they knew they were going to lose the election. It was just a ruse to claim, actually, it's all Labour's responsibility now because we had this magical plan to stop them all almost overnight. But Labour cancelled it, the cads. Where's the evidence? But it is also a double-edged sword as well. Like Cleverly and Badenoch, they may well see that leaving the ECHR is unhelpful, assuming that they're being truthful about that and not just saying it because that's how they're going to appeal to the votes they're chasing after. But if we assume that they are actually telling the truth at that point, failing to prove that they could deal with asylum in the way they wanted to while still retaining European human rights laws means they continue. I mean, they may well convince a few people that, oh yeah, now it is Labour's fault that all these people are crossing the Channel. But it also means they cannot counter those who insist that leaving the ECHR is the only way to coin a phrase, take back control. Cleverly is trying to counter the argument against leaving the ECHR. Is effectively what he's saying is, exactly what is it stopping us doing? And then people go, hey, it's stopping us sending people to Rwanda. Well, he's saying, no, it didn't stop us sending people to Rwanda. Our own laws and our own court did that. But it will fall on deaf ears, even if Cleverly wins the leadership contest, which is possible. Will he be able to shut down this background noise from within his own party? Like David Cameron was never able to do that regarding leaving the EU. And as feckless as he was a stronger leader than Cleverly. I still remember last year, James Cleverly, there was talk of a reshuffle, right? There was talk of James Cleverly being sacked as Foreign Secretary. Now, technically he was, but he was just sort of side graded into the position of Home Secretary, so David Cameron can come back as Foreign Secretary. But anyway, there were rumours, right? James Cleverly, last year, publicly begged Rishi Sunak not to sack him at an event in America. I said at the time, this is a pathetic spectacle to see from the joint third most senior member of our national government. I said at the time, how is someone so obviously craven and spineless supposed to stand up for our interests abroad? Well, if that sort of tragic behaviour is unsuitable for such a senior member of the government, it's definitely not the sort of character who's going to be tough enough to bang heads together in a very fractious party. Too few Tories are interested in facing up to facts. Many of them, I don't know what proportion of MPs, but many in the party have decided, yes, we should leave the ECHR in order to more effectively take the law on rights and freedoms back to Victorian times, which is their absolute dream. They don't care how spurious their arguments are. They didn't care during austerity. They didn't care during Brexit. They don't care now. What will be interesting, though, is if the question asked of Cleverly in the interview suddenly weren't hypothetical. If he were asked if he'd have left the cabinet if the leader said they were going to leave the ECHR. Well, what if Robert Jenrick wins the contest? He's the current frontrunner. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll win, but let's say he did. He says he wants us to leave the ECHR. So what if Jenrick wins and offers Cleverly a shadow cabinet position? So, I mean, if Jenrick wins, presumably, party policy becomes leaving the ECHR. James Cleverly says he disagrees with that. How strongly does he disagree with that? Obviously, you're not going to agree with everything the leader does. I'm not suggesting you should only take up a cabinet or shadow cabinet position if you agree with everything the leader stands for. But, there are some red lines that some politicians have. Where are his red lines? And if Cleverly becomes leader and makes the party position one of firmly not leaving the ECHR, but let's say he can't attract some of the bigger names into his shadow cabinet as a result because for them it is a red line. Will he soften the stance? Will he turn it into a, well, maybe let's wait and see, just like Sunak did? Might be interesting to see if Cleverly has got any of those red lines. But in the meantime, he remains quite correct that the block on the Rwanda plan was always inside the UK. In fact, nothing the Tories have done or wanted to do has in any way been blocked directly by the ECHR. And that remains the case until any of them can present evidence to the contrary. But none of it matters to those who want their Brexit Part 2. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.